Hey guys, what is going on? I hope you all are doing well today. Elliot here with The Fragrance Well. Welcome back and welcome to the newcomers. So today's topic, you see the title, you see the thumbnail. We're talking about mature fragrances. Now, let me just say, it's a little bit of a caveat with this one. I am not calling these scents fragrances that only older people can wear. I'm not saying younger people can't wear them. What I'm saying is a mature fragrance is basically a vibe of the fragrance, almost an energy and attitude, if you will. I think there are certain characteristics to certain fragrances that come off as being mature. In other words, they don't come off as being youthful, vibrant, energetic, fun, outgoing, attention grabbing. They're a little bit more reserved typically. So that's today's video topic, mature leaning fragrances. I've got 8 of them. It is not a ranked list. It is just a list of 8. Call it some of the ones I really like in my collection. I've got plenty of others that can be on this list, but we're gonna talk about 8 of them today. So before we get started, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like the content, and hit that bell icon so you can be notified when I upload new videos. Let's get into it. Okay, first up, coming from the House of Amouage, we have got Portrayal Man. Amouage's Portrayal Man. So this fragrance here, if you don't know anything about it, it's not necessarily one that's talked about a lot in the community at large, but this is going to be a violet leaf fragrance primarily, mixing with some really strong juniper-like notes and a lot of vetiver, giving off a woody vibe to it. Has some cade oil in it too, gives it a light kind of almost oily tar-like characteristic. I think it's really primarily there to just kind of thicken the fragrance up a bit. One of the things about this fragrance some might definitely notice, if you are familiar with Dior Fahrenheit, this is somewhat similar to that, maybe just more simplified, a lot less going on. You could almost call, I mean, that's already a very mature fragrance. You could almost call it an even more mature take on a violet leaf fragrance, similar to what Dior Fahrenheit did. This is one of my personal favorites, but I definitely consider this a mature fragrance. There's nothing outgoing and vibrant about this fragrance. It is a very full and rich and simple fragrance. You get what you get from it. I definitely think all ages can wear it, but I would be willing to bet that mostly either guys with a more mature mindset or just guys older in general would be more willing to go for something like this. So once again, from the House of Amouage, this is Portrayal Man. Next up, from the House of Amarud, this is Lunar Vetiver. Amarud, Lunar Vetiver. So since we were talking about vetiver with the last fragrance, I figured I'd just get this one out the way because I don't know about you, but I think vetiver focused scents in general do give off a mature vibe, especially because a lot of them are kind of based on those classic vetiver fragrance. The main one in my mind is going to be Guerlain's vetiver. This is not necessarily a fragrance I would put in that category per se, but it does feature some interesting spices, obviously lots of vetiver, a lot of tobacco flower in this too. It's definitely a very mature leaning fragrance. You don't think outgoing, fun, with a lot of younger people with this scent here. I think this fragrance is very serious, very mature, very professional also, but also a little bit different. It's definitely a little bit more daring, which I think you might tend to find in more mature leaning fragrances. I think this is a wonderful vetiver fragrance. I love the spice profile it has and the way it mixes with that sage that is in here. So it's also quite aromatic as well. Definitely a mature leaning fragrance in my mind. Let me know if you guys have checked this one out. Once again, from the House of Amarud, this is Lunar Vetiver. All right, next one's coming from the House of Lorenzo Pizzaghlia, and this is Vampyrum. Lorenzo Pizzaglia's Vampyrum. So this here, I just featured this in a short not too long ago, just kind of doing a quick review on it. Relatively unknown house. I imagine most people have not heard of this house or this fragrance, but this is a boozy vanilla scent. Now, you might think boozy vanilla, oh, well, that works in youthful fragrances, and it does. This one kind of teeters that line a little bit. It could kind of lean both ways, but in my mind, this is a more mature take on something like Initio's Side Effect. Also, boozy, vanilla, spicy fragrance. This fragrance doesn't really have spice in it, but it's very boozy and a lot of really dark vanilla. A lot of patchouli in this fragrance too, almost giving it kind of a chocolatey vibe. So that kind of lends to it being a little bit more earthy and having that more dark characteristic to it. That's what That's at least how I interpret it, as being a more mature take on a boozy vanilla fragrance. I really love this stuff. It's something I personally would rather go for over Initio Side Effect. I find Side Effect to be a little bit boring. I know a lot of people would completely disagree with that, but if I was gonna wear a boozy vanilla fragrance, I would rather go for something like this. So once again, from the house of Lorenzo Pizzaglia, this is Vampyrum. All right, guys, next one's coming from the house of Givenchy, and this is Gentleman Eau de Parfum. Givenchy's Gentleman Eau de Parfum. Pretty much a cult classic at this point. Not talked about much, you know, so the flankers that have come after this have definitely kind of taken the limelight away from this, but it is still a wonderful scent. But more importantly, at least as it pertains to this video, I do think this fragrance gives off a mature vibe. A lot of people think of it as kind of being a special event, special occasion fragrance. To me, that automatically means that it can have a mature vibe to it. That's not necessarily something that it has to be, but I do think those two go hand in hand. You probably know it well. Iris fragrance featuring some deep vanilla, mixing with some patchouli, a little bit of spice in this, some nice lavender on the top. Really great fragrance from the house of Givenchy. Now, I imagine people of all ages probably have worn this fragrance or do wear this fragrance, but again, it's all about the vibe that the fragrance gives off, and I think this is more mature than it is youthful. Again, teetering the lines just a little bit, but I say it leans a little bit more mature. So once again, from the house of Givenchy, this is Gentleman Eau de Parfum. All right, guys, next up from the house of Jean Varvatos, this is Vintage. Jean Varvatos Vintage. So what a great fragrance this is. The name itself does kind of lean towards what the fragrance smells like. It does have a vintage, old school masculine-like smell quality to it, but it doesn't smell old or dated per se. You got a little bit of a spicy quality to this. There's leathery touches, woody touches, some light aromatics in there, and the fragrance just smells amazing, especially for the price point. But all that being said, the fragrance definitely has a more mature vibe to it, which would make sense because of it is a kind of a fragrance that pays homage to that classic, clean, spicy, gentleman fragrance scent DNA. Again, I think people of all ages can wear this, and all ages probably do wear this. It's a really great scent, but it definitely has a mature vibe to it. It is masculine too, but primarily a mature vibe. Once again, from the house of Jean Varvatos, this is Vintage. All right, next one's coming from the house of Guerlain, and this is L'Instant de Guerlain Eau de Parfum. L'Instant de Guerlain Eau de Parfum from the house of Guerlain. This is a slightly sweet and spicy gourmand fragrance. Has some tea accords in it. Again, a lot of spice. Has a little bit of a chocolatey vibe to it. Overall, the fragrance kind of reminds me of a chai tea with some other stuff going on. This fragrance is interesting because to me, in many ways, it doesn't necessarily lend to being mature or youthful. It's kind of sitting in its own realm outside of that. But I chose to put it on the list mainly because I'd be willing to bet, I could be wrong, that more older guys or more mature minded guys would go for a scent like this versus, more juvenile, more youthful minded guys. Put it this way, if you wanted to come off as mature with your scent choice, this might be a good one to go with, versus if you wanted to come off as youthful and vibrant, I don't think you would choose this one. But I do think this one can be worn by all ages, but it just has a more mature vibe overall, in my opinion, or at least I think more mature people would choose this over youthful. So once again, from the house of Guerlain, this is L'Instant de Guerlain, the Eau de Parfum. All right, next one's coming from the house of Brioni, and this is Brioni Eau de Parfum. Brioni Eau de Parfum. So this fragrance here, first of all, is just super, super classy. It's a very ozonic, violet inspired fragrance. It doesn't have that petrol vibe. It's more ozonic, more kind of watery, if you will. A lot of ambroxan in this, so you have that amber wood-like quality to it. A little bit of tonka bean in this to sweeten up. Quite a bit of musk in this too. Kind of a fruitiness on the top. Very classy fragrance. And in my mind, that classiness lends to this being a mature fragrance choice. Now, I think this one can easily be worn by all ages, again, like many of these on this list. But the overall attitude of this fragrance, I think, is very business oriented or very classy oriented, very serious oriented. Therefore, the fragrance has a mature vibe to it. But man, this is an awesome choice. I don't have any fragrances in my collection like this, and I remember when I first got a sample of it, I said, I gotta have that. So good stuff from the house of Brioni. Once again, this is Brioni Eau de Parfum. All right, guys, and lastly, from the house of Wilhelm Parfumerie, this is London Funk. Wilhelm Parfumerie's London Funk. This is another one that I guess in some ways, overall, you don't really think of it as being mature or youthful, but you could probably say that more mature guys would go for this over guys who are a lot younger. This is an overwhelmingly very woody and green fragrance. There's really not a lot in here to sweeten it up or balance it out. It's leaning to one side all the way, and I think that alone makes this a mature fragrance choice simply because I think green fragrances like this that are this strong and this pungent are probably going to be more related to fragrances of yesteryear that might have been like that. I remember I had my family smell this and my dad said, oh, I've smelled stuff like that before. So that told me right there that, you know, fragrances of this characteristic could definitely be found in older fragrance releases, older fragrance formulations. This does have a slight cannabis quality to it, not too strong, but it's kind of hidden in there. All that being said, it does not come off as youthful or playful at all. This is a mature fragrance through and through. So once again, from the house of Wilhelm Parfumerie, this is London Funk. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for this video. Let me know down in the comments below, what are some fragrances you have in your fragrance wardrobe that you would consider to be mature leaning fragrances? Fragrances you would not wear if you wanna come off as more youthful and vibrant with your fragrance choice. I appreciate you guys watching all the way until the end. Remember to be well and smell well, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Fragrance Well. Have a good one.